Okay. Yeah. Hello, hello. I have my mute button on. But anyway, thank you once again for tuning in to my podcast, Real Talk About Life and Relationships with me, multi certified and master life coach Stephanie K. I'm also an author as well with a bunch of other hats I wear, but I won't go into that all over again like I usually do. So for those of you who might be tuning in for the first time, my show typically comes on Thursdays at 12 p.m. So today is Friday, and the reason why I'm a little bit late is because I'm in the Great Minnesota, and we had a snowstorm yesterday, and so in the morning I had to shovel snow, which threw off my whole calendar, my schedule for that day. So I just decided to go ahead and push it back a day. We got to improvise. When stuff goes wrong, we have to improvise. And so now I'm doing it today. But typically my show comes on Thursdays at 12 p.m. And I'm really going to try my best to stick to that unless I figure out that there's a better time and change it. But that's what I'm going with for now. You can watch my show on several different platforms. So I'm on YouTube, I'm on Instagram, Facebook. Sometimes I post them on LinkedIn, not all the time, so don't rely on that too much. And then you can also watch me on the Roku uh, through an app called the Entertainment Theater app. So you can find that on the Google Play Store or the iStore. And it's also on the Roku as well. Again, it's the Entertainment Theater app. It's an app for, podcasts, indie shows, stuff like that. So if nothing else, please show your support to us little people who are trying to make a dent in this world ourselves with less funds, for lack of a better word. So um so that's it for my intro stuff. I just want to make sure I don't forget anything, and then I want to go ahead and dive into the topic for today. um speaking of that, next week I really want to try to stick to the schedule next week, but next Thursday, day after Christmas, is kind of iffy, but I'm going to try my best to be on. If not, I might push it back a day or so just to give you a heads up. But anyway, so our topic for today is how our growth affects our romantic relationships. Now, I want to give a little bit of a background for this topic because um, I did this topic last week. So I guess you could say part one of this topic. So far since I started my podcast, which I started it in mid-November, I have been talking about growth. And the reason why I've been talking about growth is because it is the purpose of everything. It is the foundation of everything. And so I want to start there because I'm gonna build on that, and I'm gonna continue to build on that and refer to that throughout this podcast to show where I'm going. And so it's if you don't have a good foundation when you're building anything, it's gonna be difficult to sustain everything that gets piled on top of that. So the foundation is growth. The purpose of life is growth. Now the direction that we're growing in, the reason why we're growing is a different thing. But we were put here, if you have any type of understanding of faith. I am a Christian, just in case those of you who don't know. And so you can have a different faith and still believe that we're put here to grow. Like it's pretty obvious to me, but for some people it's not. And so that's what we're here for. We're here to grow. We're here to learn. We're here to become better people, to really understand some certain principles about life, about ourselves, about other people, stuff like that, even about God. And so that's the main point why we're here. So I talked about in my first podcast that a lot of people make their life about a lot of different things: success, family, their talents, their gifts. And that's great. It's not bad. But the purpose of all those things is to help you grow. That's what their purpose is for in your life. And if you use them in a different way, as for example, making them the purpose of your life, you're going to start having a lot of problems in your life because things are not in line. They're not in alignment. So if you want to know more about that topic, you can go back and watch the first video because I dive into it a little bit more than what I'm going to say here. But yes, everything is about growth. So I talked about how life is about growth. And then I talked about how we grow, because some people don't even know how we grow. I'm not just talking about your body. I'm not just talking about your mind. There's a lot of different ways in which we grow. And you have to understand the different ways in which you grow in order to feed that. Like how many of us, I know I'm guilty of this. have plants, and you try to take care of them, but they keep dying. You know, I do it all the time. I love plants, but I kill them probably 75% of the time. And it's because you need to know what the plant needs. Every plant doesn't need the same thing. And so, I mean, they need the basis of the same thing, which is water, sunlight. Um, yeah, I forgot everything the plants needs, but dirt, water, sunlight, stuff like that. But then it varies. And so it's the same way with us. We all need basic things. We have our spiritual part, our minds, our emotions, our bodies, all these things, different parts of us. And so we need to grow these things. So I talked about what that looks like, the different parts of ourselves that need to grow, and what that looks like in order to grow those things. And so then I talked about how relationships affect our growth. And so that was last week's. And then today I want to go into how relationship affects how growth affects our romantic relationships, because it is a little bit different from all the other relationships. And so I want to go into that, give you some pointers, give you some tips to help you understand not only what you need from relationships and what you need to give in relationships, but actually when you don't do these things, this is why relationships don't last, especially romantic ones. Now, when it comes to your kids and your parents and your family and your friends, it follows a little bit of a different pattern, and I'll explain all that in a minute. But romantic relationships are the source of everything. So it was like, you know, the saying, what came first, the chicken or the egg? In this case, it is the chicken, because the family comes from the romantic connection between two people first. So God made Adam and Eve, and everything that we have today when it comes to relationship and people stem from that. And so the relationship of two people determines how the kids are raised, what those kids bring into the community, what you can bring into the community, and then you can extend that to city, state, country. You know, all of these things boil down to these two people doing what they were designed to do as close to correctly as possible. And I keep seeing this green sheet back there, and it's kind of bugging me. So I just want to point out to you guys that that sheet is there to hide Christmas presents for my kids. I got to rock that stuff. I'll do it later today, but that's why that's there. But I keep looking at it, and it's kind of distracting me, but that's why it's there. So anyway, so back to what I was saying. So romantic relationships are very, very important. They were the first relationships. One of the first relationships that God created on this earth was between a man and a woman. And so this relationship is going to be different from all the other relationships you have, because it is the most intimate relationship that you will have, the longest, most intimate, hopefully longest, most intimate relationship you will have for your entire life. Now, when it comes to your parents, you have that relationship, but it typically lasts 18 years or so, but you're gradually growing away from your parents and developing your own identity. So that's different. When you have your kids as a parent, you're in a position of authority. And so your job is to guide them. And then, of course, they're going to grow away from you. And that relationship is different. When you have your family and friends, you don't sleep with them. You don't eat with them every day. You don't pay bills with them and stuff like that. So a marital relationship is completely different. You share, or you're supposed to share, almost everything for hopefully the rest of your life. So there's no other relationship like that you will have in your life, unless you're like a conjoined twin or something like that. And I'm not saying that to be funny, because their relationships have to be very, very on point, or they're going to have a difficult time being productive in their lives. And so marriage, you can kind of look at it like a conjoined twin kind of situation. You're bound to this person spiritually, mentally. Like I said, you pay bills, you see each other every day, you sleep together, not just physically in the bed together, but you share your bodies. Like, who else do you have that type of close relationship with? So it's very, very important, and it can get messy very quickly. And so romantic relationships is something that we should pay particular attention to when it comes to our growth, because again, it is there for a purpose. God created it for a purpose, and that's what I want to kind of dive into today. So yeah, I'm just looking at my notes here, make sure I am following my points. So not only are romantic relationships the most intimate, I don't want to keep saying, because people have a lot of romantic relationships. So it's not like you just have one, and a lot of times we have several before we get married and stuff like that, and then we get married, and that doesn't even last a lot of the time. But I want to just focus on that in the mind frame of it being one, because that's what it's intended to be. So I want to use that as a framework to kind of establish everything that I'm going to say about romantic relationships today. So with that romantic relationship, because it is so intimate, because it is so close, because you have to share everything, it will present the biggest challenges that you will most likely face when it comes to relationships. Because when it comes to relationships, there will be tension. Just like you're sharing so much of yourself, your life with another person, it creates more opportunities for there to be problems. This person is going to see stuff about you that if it was not for the fact that you guys share so much, they may never know it. Or you can't get away from them when you're in a bad mood and stuff like that. And so they get to see all these different sides of you. When it comes to your friends, if you're stressed out, you can go home. If they're getting your nerves, you can leave. But that's not the case a lot of times when it comes to a marital relationship. And I'm going to stick to marital relationship, although everybody, of course, is not married as well, but this still applies to you also. And so with that, because the person gets to see you in so many different environments and moods, and you guys share everything, or you should be sharing everything, there's going to be more opportunities for friction. Now, all relationships are going to bring friction, and actually that's the point. So when you get people who say they have a friendship and they never argue, that's kind of a problem. Or if they never have, and I don't say argue, but they never have an issue, they never have conflict, that's a problem. That shows that you guys are not growing, which again is the point of life. And so when it comes to us individually, we are to grow, and relationships are another pathway of growth. It is actually one of the deepest pathways of growth, because it will show you things about yourself that you would never otherwise see. So I always say that people have a biased perspective of themselves. And so people will always think that they're either much better than what they are or much worse than what they are. So, but it takes those relationships, especially if they're healthy, loving relationships around you, to give you a more balanced, accurate perception of yourself, or I like to say a reflection of yourself. And so once you get a more balanced, healthy perspective of yourself, it shows you different ways that you can grow, or that you need to grow, that you may have never been aware of. And so I always like to say to people, I talk about how in the Bible, when God said it was not good for Adam to be alone, I've heard all different types of, assumptions about why God said that, because he was lonely, because he needed to procreate and all that type of stuff. And that doesn't necessarily mean that that's not the case. But the reason that God said it was not good for Adam to be alone is because Adam cannot grow by himself. Like, he needed somebody else there to reflect himself to, so they can point out the things to him, or help him see the ways in which he needs to grow. And so if you are, by yourself, within yourself, again, you're going to think you're fine, or you're going to think you're terrible, and you might not even be that terrible. And so so that is the point of relationships. I mean, there are other things that come with relationships, but the point of relationships is to help us grow. I do think that before the fall, that growth was easier, but because of the fall now, because we're in a sinful state and we're fallen state, that growth is now much more difficult than it would have been if we were not in a fallen state. But that's the point of relationships, is to help us grow. And a lot of people want relationships for comfort, for love, for companionship, stuff like that. And that's great. It's not bad, but that is not the point of it. The point is to grow, because if you think your relationship is just to make you happy, make you feel good, when friction starts to come, you're going to see that friction as an enemy, when actually that friction is there to help you grow. And so, and that's how you need to perceive it. And so with romantic relationships, there's going to be a lot more friction because it's much more intimate, but those are opportunities to help you grow and see yourself and the other person in a different way. So again, if you're single and you're by yourself and you don't have a romantic relationship, it is your responsibility to continue to grow yourself in that environment. But when you're now in a relationship, now not only do you have to grow within that, so there's still that individual growth, but now there's that relational growth, and then you have to be mindful of the other person's individual growth as well. And so the individual growth still stays the same. So you do have a lot of people who think that once you get in a relationship, you lose your total identity to the person, and you guys growing together is the only thing. No, that's not healthy. You still have to grow yourself as an individual. They still have to grow themselves as an individual. And then both of you guys, through that individual growth, will now have relational growth. And so it's very, very important. Like, these things have a system as far as how they work and how they are intended to work. And so when you get outside of that system, that's when you have problems. Because if you feel like once you get in a relationship, once you get married, now it's just you and that person, you guys have to grow together, and you pay no attention to your personal growth anymore, you can possibly suffocate the other person. It's going to cause a lot of tension, a lot of stress. You're going to start expecting things from that person that they were not designed to do, and it's not their responsibility to do. And again, it causes a lot of other problems in relationships. And so that individual growth and that personal growth and that relational growth should be working simultaneously. But unfortunately, when it gets off track is when you start having problems in your relationships. But through the relationship, if it's on track, and I'm going to go through, like, I call it the growth cycle of relationships, but if it stays on track, the relationship gets deeper, you guys grow more, you start to understand yourself deeper, you start to understand another person more deeply, you understand what principles are as far as love and forgiveness and kindness and selfishness. Like, you learn to understand the repercussions of those things and what they actually mean, not just in theory. Because we like to say, oh, we love a person, and a lot of times that word is thrown around very callously. But now within relationship, you get to see, especially romantic relationship, what love actually looks like, what it actually takes, what has to be done, what has to be sacrificed. If people say that love shouldn't hurt, love does hurt sometimes. And so you get to know with the depth of what love really means, as opposed to just this idea of what it means when you see it worked out in real time. So it's just, for example, you can say, like, when you go to college, you learn all this stuff in the books, but then when you get out of college, it's time to now apply those things you learned. And then once you start applying them, you start seeing that the book didn't teach you everything. Your idea didn't teach you everything. Even what somebody else may have told you didn't teach you everything. Once you're in the trenches for yourself, it's like, oh, wow, okay, this is a little bit different than what I thought. And then you got to figure out what it takes to navigate that thing so that you can continue to grow and the relationship can continue to grow. And then once you start bringing kids and stuff like that into the equation, everything that you've done personally and relationally will start now to affect the other people around you that need to grow as well. So it's very, very complicated, but also very organized, in the sense that if you can get the foundation correctly, it's much easier for you to transition to positively affecting all these other factors that are also a part of the equation, if that makes sense. So how growth affects our romantic relationships is that it will cause the relationship to either grow or die. So if your personal growth is not good, it's going to kill the relationship. If that other person's personal growth is not good, it's going to kill the relationship. And a lot of people don't realize this. Like, they think when their relationship starts falling apart, it's about all these other different things, when really all it boils down to is that somebody in the relationship is not growing. And so that's what needs to be paid attention to. Not the garbage, not what you said, not what you like, not what you don't like, not what he didn't do, not what she didn't do, not what you want. All those things play into that. But at the core of it is that somebody in the relationship is not growing. And unless that person in the relationship realizes that and starts to make changes to grow, the relationship is going to be very difficult to maintain, especially a happy relationship. It's going to become dysfunctional. And eventually, and sometimes unbeknownst to the people involved, the relationship has already started to die. And so just like when a plant is in the process of dying, you don't always see it right away, but eventually the plant will start showing signs that it's not getting enough nutrients, it's not getting enough sun, it's not getting enough water and stuff like that. And those things will also surface in the relationship, which will also bring more friction. And yes. So now you have to, so when the friction comes, because that's going to be the main point to let you know where you need to grow and how you need to grow, is through friction. And again, a lot of people get sidetracked by the friction instead of using the friction to figure out what is in need of sun in the relationship, what is in need of some water, whether it's you or the other person, because those things are going to be connected. And so when you have friction, it's usually about something deeper than what's on the surface. It's the same thing with our lives. We can look at ourselves on the surface and we can struggle with some certain things and not really understand what it is under the surface. And we have to do some soul searching to sometimes figure those things out. But it's the same thing in a relationship. So most of the time, what you are arguing about is not the real problem. What the real problem is what's underneath the surface. And you have to be insightful enough and perspective enough to pinpoint those things so you guys can get to the root of the problem and grow from there. So so once you start having friction, you need to figure out how you first are contributing to the friction, are contributing to the problem. Now, I will say that some stuff is not that important. In any, just like you as a person, you're going to have major needs and minor needs. That the major needs need to be met or there's a problem. The minor needs, if they're not met, is not a huge problem. And if you can get them met, great. But if you don't, it's usually not a big deal. Now, the major needs, if they're not met, it creates huge problems. And so it's the same thing in relationships. There are going to be minor things in relationship that is really not worth arguing about or making a big deal about. And you need to understand what those things are, because I do hear a lot of young people in relationships and they talk about, oh, if I was married to so-and-so, I would not allow them to leave socks on my floor. Or if I was married to so-and-so, I would not allow them to leave dishes in the sink. That's stupid. Don't pick your battles. Arguing about some socks on the floor is not worth sometimes the headache that it brings, because it's really not that important. Now, if the issue with socks being on the floor and dishes being on the sink and stuff like that is that the person is continuously being messy, that is something bigger to address as opposed to just a sock or a dish, if that makes any sense. So that's why I say you have to go underneath the surface, because if it's a one-off thing, or maybe a 2-off thing or a 3-off thing, then it's not something that you need to bring a lot of attention to. So again, I don't want to go too much into this because it's a lot that goes into it. And I prefer to talk to people one-on-one when it comes to stuff like this, so we can address the specific issues that they're having in their relationship. But the whole point is pick your battles. Okay, so now friction is going to come and you got to figure out, okay, what is actually being communicated in this friction and how am I contributing to the friction? So now a lot of people, what they do is they just point the finger at the other person. You did this, no, you did this, and you did this, and you did this, and you did this. And the finger pointing doesn't usually lead to a resolved problem. As a matter of fact, finger pointing is usually our subconscious way of trying to avoid the problem because we don't want to look at ourselves. And so we have to take a step back, which is not difficult, which is not easy to do, because the friction also can be a distraction from you doing that. And so you got all these different things playing. And so you have to be able to pull back and say, okay, let me look at myself and figure out if this is legitimate or not. And not just get defensive and try to defend the finger that's being pointed at you. You have to kind of turn that off for a minute. Look at yourself and say, is what is being said in this friction the deeper thing that's being said, and how am I contributing to the friction? Even if what your partner is saying you don't think is true, but what they're telling you is, you still have to examine it, because it could be. Again, people always see themselves from a biased point of view. A lot of times we think we're much better than what we are or much worse than what we are. So if your partner is saying something that you don't necessarily agree with, don't dismiss it so quickly, because it could be something that you're not seeing. And if you go back to what I said in the beginning, this is what relationships are for. They're to help you see things in yourself that you cannot see on your own. So you go back and you say, okay, so-and-so said that I'm lazy. Is there any truth to this? You do some investigation, you contemplate it, some self-reflection, you figure it out if it's true or not. Even if that means going to some other people who you may have lived with, as say if you had a roommate or your parents or somebody who you can trust, that they will give you an honest opinion, non-biased opinion without an agenda. Hey, do you think I'm messy? Do you think that's true? And if I am, how did that affect you when we live together? And you get some feedback. Like, we all need feedback, everybody. So then you do some, and then you think about, okay, maybe I am a little bit messy, and I see now how it affects other people, another person that's living with me. What changes do I need to make in order to make my partner that I'm living with much more comfortable, and we stop bringing up this issue, this thing stops becoming an issue. Okay, now I'm just talking about something as simple as cleaning, but as you can imagine, it can get very, very deep depending on what the argument is about. So again, you do that self-reflection and you figure out how you're contributing to the issue, what you can do better, if it's true or not, first of all, how you can do better and what things you might be changing. Now, for example, if you do that, so there's an issue, okay, let me step back, look at myself, I'm asking other people, I'm doing some self-evaluation. Okay, sometimes I do that, and sometimes, okay, yes, I have come to the conclusion that I am kind of messy. And when I lived by myself, it was fine. I didn't even realize I was that messy. But now that another person is in my life, I can see that I'm kind of messy and that it's having a negative effect on my relationship. Now, with you seeing that, it will allow you to grow as a person. You will say, you know what, let me start picking up behind myself and being more mindful of the person that I live in the house with. You see, you just grew. That's what I'm saying. It helps us grow as a person. Now, then once you do that, or you come to that conclusion, you can now go back to your partner and say, look, I thought about it. You're right. I'm kind of messy. I'm going to do this and do this and do that so that we don't keep having this problem. And now, because you've done that and you communicated, which is the key to a relationship, and you've addressed your partner's concern, now you guys as a relationship grow from there. Now, even if that conversation involves you saying, you know what, I know I'm messy and stuff like this, and you take ownership of your part, because that's the key to get people to listen to their side, to get to your side, when you take ownership of your side, because that stops the finger pointing. So now you say, I understand, blah, 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 but, and this is what I'm going to do, these are changes I'm going to make, but now I also would like to point out to you that blah, 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 blah. You see what I'm saying? So now it's their turn to now go back, look at themselves, evaluate, and then come back to the relationship with some new realizations, some changes in themselves. And now, if both of you guys do that, you will grow. It's unavoidable. You will automatically grow. You will automatically become closer. You will understand each other. You'll improve your communication. And this is what I mean. Personal growth is going to be indicative to relational growth. And when you have problems in relationship, it boils down to somebody in the relationship is not growing. It could be both of you. It could be one of you. But you're only responsible for you. You can't force the other person to grow. It is their responsibility, just like it's your responsibility to do some self-reflection. Because I don't care how good of a spouse you are, you cannot go in somebody's brain and make them self-reflect. You just cannot do that. So it's their job to do that on their own. If they don't do it, it can kill the relationship. No matter how much you put into it, no matter how much you pray about it, no matter how much you sacrifice for it, if that person is not willing to also do the personal self-reflection that is necessary for their growth, it is going to affect your relationship and will most likely lead to it ending at some point. Now, you can stay in that relationship for a very, very long time before it ends, and then just keep dealing with the same stuff over and over again until it starts to have a negative effect on you as a person. But eventually the relationship is going to die, and it's probably in the process of dying. Because if you can't do that when it comes to small issues like socks, you're not going to be able to do it when it comes to huge issues like money, like the kids, like, debts and things like that. So this is how relationships grow. This is how growth affects our romantic relationships. And so when a lot of people ask, again, divorce rate is on the rise. A lot of people are not really getting married as much as they used to. Marriages, a lot of people are just living together without being married, which brings the same problems. I mean, it does. And a lot of, especially with social media, you can see that the sexes, male and female, when it comes to romantic relationships, are gradually pulling away from each other and pointing fingers at each other more and more and more, and not really able to come together as much. I see so much arguing on the internet when it comes to romantic relationships that I sometimes feel like, wow, we're in a lot of trouble as a race of people, as a human race, because so many people just can't get it together. You have women pointing the finger at men, men pointing the finger at women, and nobody doing that personal self-reflection to improve themselves, to make them relationship ready, or to be in a relationship and function. Because if you can't, so the important thing is that this whole self-reflection thing, when it comes to relationship, it doesn't start once you get in a relationship. You have to know how to do this before you get in a relationship. Now, a relationship can teach you how to do it, especially if you really love the person, because it will push you to want to do the necessary things it takes to keep the relationship together. So that self-reflection, the primary motivator for doing that is love. You love yourself enough to personally reflect and actually want to grow as a person, and you love that other person enough to do the work that it takes to keep that relationship together. So, but if people don't do that, if people don't work on themselves before they're in a relationship, it's going to be very, very difficult for you to do it once you get in a relationship. Now, you can always learn it. It's going to be a little bit more rocky. The stakes will be a little bit higher when you're in a relationship, but it is possible to learn how to do it if you're already in a relationship. So don't think I'm saying that that's not possible. But if you can learn how to do it before you get in a relationship, that's going to make it all the more better. So you do that personal reflection, you guys come together, you work stuff out, you communicate. It's going to even help you communicate better, and practice communicating, and then the relationship will go from there. And so you don't want your love for yourself competing with your love for your partner, because to me, a lot of times that's what finger pointing boils down to, is like, no, you're the problem and I'm the problem, you're the problem and you're the problem and you're the problem, whatever. But it's you, an opportunity for you to grow and change that person. You love yourself. You want to pacify yourself and make yourself feel better and work things out in yourself and be okay with yourself more than you want to do that with the other person. And to me, that just means you love yourself more than you love the other person. And whatever you love, you're going to take care of, you're going to protect, you're going to feed, whatever. And so if you're willing to do that for yourself, and you put the love for yourself in competition with your love for the other person, that's also a problem. So you have to love yourself enough to and love the other person. You have to love yourself enough to do that self-reflection, and love the other person and value the relationship enough to do the self-reflection that's going to allow you both to grow. Does that make sense? If it doesn't make sense, let me know. So now I will say that when you go back when I say you evaluate where the problem is coming from, there's a healthy way to do it, and there's a healthy, not a healthy way to do it. Now, I just explained the healthy way, where you kind of get feedback, you maybe do some research. If you have a counselor, you talk to your counselor, you really have to be open to the fact that you could be part of the problem. Now, unhealthy evaluation or self-reflection is when you're not open to the fact that you might be the problem, because anything you want to see, that's what you're going to see. And you're going to keep making yourself think that you didn't do anything wrong. It's not that serious. It's not the other person. They're the problem. They're the problem. They're the problem. That's not healthy evaluation. And even if you do go ask other people, because most people in that frame of mind is not going to go ask other people. But even if you do, you're only going to take from them what you want to hear. And you're only going to go to people who are going to tell you what you want to hear. That's a problem. That's not healthy evaluation. You have to be open enough to say, I might be the problem, and I really want to find out, again, how I am contributing to this problem. So yeah, I just wanted to point that out there, because some people run to people who just tell them what they want to hear, and they say, well, so-and-so backed up my opinion of myself that I already have, so, I'm not the problem. Yeah, that's the problem. So you have to be willing to go to people who is not going to tell you what you want to hear, and they're honest with you, and, stuff like that. It's very, very important that you have people in your life like that. Again, that's the purpose of relationships, to help you see stuff about yourself that you would not otherwise see, so you can grow. Okay, so I am getting over my time. I went about 5 minutes over my time. I just wanted to, lay out some basic steps about how growth affects our romantic relationships and how important that is. And unfortunately, I'm sad to say that if you are a person in a relationship who continuously growing, that does not mean the relationship is going to survive. I mean, I tell people a lot of the times when I talk to them that I'm a relationship coach, and that then when they find out I got divorced last year, they feel like it kind of contradicts each other. Well, how are you a relationship coach, but your relationship didn't work? That's because it is not up to one person to make a relationship work. If you think that you have a dysfunction of your relationship, it takes two people. And both people have to be growing. It's a partnership. It's an investment. If you're growing and the other person is not, it does not matter if you're the best spouse in the world. It is not going to work. It is not. So somebody having a relationship that did not work is not evidence that they are not knowledgeable about what it takes to make a relationship work, because a relationship is about partnership, and it's equal partnership. It's like, when I was in school, I always hated working with team. Like when they say partner up with somebody, because some way or another, a lot of the work would either fall on me or the other person. You know, somebody in the group was not pulling their weights, and then they end up getting a good grade for work that they didn't even do. And so I didn't typically like that, but you just had to do it because that's the point, to work in a group. And actually the teacher's trying to teach you something by having you work in a group and understand what it means to work with other people, because again, that is not something you can learn on your own. So once you get in relationships, regardless of the type of relationship it is, you learn different skills about how to navigate certain situations and certain people that you can never and will never learn on your own. And so it's the same thing when it comes to marriage and romantic relationships. It is not completely up to you for that relationship to work. If you think it is, that's a problem. And if you can't recognize what is your part versus what is the other person's part, that is also a problem. And no matter how much you grow, if the other person does not grow, that is also a problem. And you need to know where the boundaries are when it comes to that, even if it means walking away. It's not ideal. Even in my situation, is not what I wanted to do. But at some point, if you want to remain a healthy person and you don't want to keep nurturing unhealthy relationships in your life, you need to know when to walk away. It's just the reality of the situation. And for those of you, because I meet a lot of people who are Christians that make it seem like you're never supposed to divorce and blah, 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 blah. And I understand God does not like divorce. He did not want us to get divorced, but he does understand that sometimes it's necessary. The Bible even says it. He says, even the scripture that says, as long as it's within your ability, live in peace with people. He understands that sometimes it's not in your ability, and that's okay. You're not responsible for other people. And so you're responsible for yourself and as much as you can do, and the other person is responsible for their part as well. So so that's it for today. I just really wanted to jump on here and let you guys know how our growth affects our romantic relationships. If you want to look at the show that I did last week, about how our growth affects relationships in general. Then again, I did a show about how we grow and the points of growth and, stuff like that. You can go back and look at all of those things. And again, these are going to be the foundations that I continue to build on as I continue to do this podcast. So please make sure you like, follow, share, invite people to my page, anybody that you think might need to hear this information, because it's very, very important. Lots of relationships and families get destroyed because people don't understand these basic things and are so unwilling to look at themselves till it again causes destruction, because it goes against the natural flow of life, which is to grow. I also get into, especially with my courses, about how to have difficult conversations with people, how to prepare for those type of conversations, healthy ways of interacting in those conversations and stuff like that, because we all need those communication skills as well. So if you're interested in my courses, or even just having a free session with me because you want to dive into this a little bit more about your own personal situation, please feel free to do that. I do offer a free session for anybody who wants to use that as well. You can visit my website at www.unveilingthespirit.com for a free session. And then you can also find out more about my other courses on that page as well. I do have a lot of courses coming out next year that I did not put on that page, but you can still go check it out and join my email list. So when I do post those, you will get notified of those as well. So I like to wrap up with two questions that so you just give you some things to be thinking about. And these are the same questions from last week. So if you want to know if your relationship is a healthy relationship, two questions that you need to ask yourself is, how does your relationship respond to friction? Does it grow from the friction, or does it get more damage from the friction? Stuff is not getting resolved. And then the second question is connected to the first one, which is, do you grow from these encounters with your significant other? And so if your relationship responds to friction by stuff just escalating and getting worse and worse and worse until people just give up and nothing gets resolved, that's a problem. And if that causes you to not grow from those encounters, that's a problem as well. So even if you want to use your free session to talk to me about if my relationship is healthy or not, and how do I get it back to being healthy, we can discuss things of that nature as well. So other than that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up for today, and make sure you guys tune in next week. I will post a new topic on Sunday or Monday for this coming week. Again, this is real talk about life and relationships, getting down to the nitty gritty so that we can actually grow as people and have healthy relationships, which all of us, we want the results of those things, but a lot of times we don't either want to do the work that it takes to get those results, or we don't know the work that needs to be done. And so this is why I'm doing my podcast, because I'm trying to help people navigate these things better and understand what they need and what other people need, so we can actually get the results in our personal lives and our relationship lives that we actually want. So, but that's about it. So you guys have a good day. Merry Christmas, because I won't see you again until after Christmas. And again, make sure you tune in. Ask me any questions in the chat that you have. I will be happy to answer them. And that's it. So thank you so much for tuning in. Have a good day. Have a good weekend. Merry Christmas. See you next week. Bye.